I think that one of the most exciting parts of ministry, of being a minister, is when I see the look of surprise or delight that comes with those moments when people learn something new or get an insight that seems to answer some lingering question. It's a big reward for a minister to witness those aha moments in the lives of people. Actually, I had one of those moments this week. It wasn't an earth-shattering moment, but it was a new insight for me, an answer to a lingering question, a moment when I sat up in my chair and said out loud, "Ah." Do you ever have those moments? No. You might have figured this out. What happened? Ah. You might have figured out the answer to this kind of a question years ago, or maybe it's an answer to a question you haven't even asked yet. But I wanted to begin today by sharing my new insight. I've been reading a bit about the history of Christmas and the Christmas celebrations, trying to find more insights into the way Christmas has been celebrated over the past 2 millennia by looking for sources from various times and places. What seems to be consistent throughout the history of the church is a sort of a nostalgia that looks back to previous celebrations as if they were somehow better, somehow more pure, somehow more appropriate than the current celebrations we have now. Do you ever find yourself around this time of the year saying, "It doesn't feel like Christmas just yet"? Are you one of those people? It doesn't feel like Christmas just this year. Catalina says that every year. I'm waiting after all our marriage to find out what Christmas feels like, because it never feels like Christmas just yet. It's always around the corner. Because maybe Christmas is remembered as something back then. And it doesn't matter, if I found out, if you're talking about people here who are reminiscing about Christmas in 1948, or the stories from the 1830s, wishing Christmas was more like it was in the 1780s, or the tales from the Middle Ages, referring back to the good old days of the Roman Empire. There's a longing for the past, for celebrations that seems to undergird all of Christian history. And so I brought along to show you today this book from the Williams family collection, handed down by generations, the Big Christmas Wonder Book, given to my dad and his sister from Grandpa and Grandma. So that makes it my great-grandparents passed this down circa 1937. It's a collection of Christmas cheer designed, it says, to, make kids feel good about Christmas. They must have been well-read kids back then, I reckon. It's very solid sort of material, but here it is. And it's mostly sort of looking back material, but maybe I'll save you one other little detail about this book for a moment, till I tell you about my aha moment. The longing for the past celebration seems to be the thing that you can find all throughout history. But that's, and that we like to look back nostalgically, but that wasn't the aha moment for me. I've known that we long for past celebrations for a long time. I've seen it, and I've heard it before in other celebrations and settings. There's a tendency in Western society to reflect on the good old days that I think has always been present, even though we know sometimes that the good old days are no better than the present. What was new though for me was the realization that most biblical celebrations focus on the better days of the future. Think about this for a moment. Not looking back nostalgically, but focusing on the better days of the future. Jewish Passover celebrations have told the story of the Exodus from slavery for over 4,000 years. But there's always included a sense of hope for tomorrow, for the coming year, in anticipation of the next liberation that's coming. At the Last Supper, Jesus said, I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. He was looking for the great Passover celebration of the future as much as he was of the past. And that's made me think that someone I once heard describe what we do here today in this communion as like entering into a time machine. Think Doctor Who. We're entering into a time machine because in here we remember what happened on the night of Jesus' arrest and betrayal. So we are taken back in the time machine. But we say this is also a foretaste of the heavenly kingdom, heavenly banquet prepared for all. We're taken forward. As we come to the table, we enter into this time machine that takes us back, but projects us forward to what is yet to come. My new awareness this week was that we tend to look at the past wistfully, rather than seeing in the past a sign of hope for the future. Our text today from Isaiah is speaking words of hope to a people who are in exile. All they've known has been taken away. The primary symbols of their society are gone. The temple was destroyed. Their king has been taken away in shackles. Their cities were in a shambles. The people themselves had been taken to a foreign land. Life as they knew it was gone. In many ways, as I reflected, their situation was worse, far worse, than the situation in Darwin following Cyclone Tracy. Not just buildings in one city, but an entire nation had been destroyed. And in the midst of their despair, Isaiah offers a word of hope, not by wishfully looking to the past, but by seeing in the past hope for tomorrow. The glory of the Lord will be revealed, he says. The great king of their past, King David, could not compare with the great king that God will bring. The sense of peace that was present during David's reign served only as an appetizer for the real thing that was just over the horizon. The past may provide clues, but hope lies in the future. We, on the other hand, sometimes look back at simpler times in Darwin and wish we could go back to a time in the good old days. I remember 30 years ago, there was no air conditioners in the house. You wussy people that need air, oh wait, I don't want them now, need air conditioners. You know, there was a lot of things that were simpler than even 30 years ago. And if you come back to Darwin after 30 years, you can see a lot of changes, I can tell you that. We look at the commercialised celebrations of Christmas and wish that we could reclaim a simpler life. And then you need to read the history of what Christmas Day was like after Cyclone Tracy. If I've read it correctly, check where the historians are, it was Doug McKenzie was the minister, yeah, and Doug McKenzie and one other person were here for a Christmas morning service on Christmas Day. Out there on the lawn with a banana tree. Okay? 2 people. But they remembered Christmas, and maybe we think, yeah, that was simpler times. while we're wistfully looking at the past, Isaiah is pointing to the future. Isaiah says with confidence that God will come and bring something better than we have ever known. Okay, so like I said, that might not be an earth-shattering revelation for you, but it was a startling realization to me and a pertinent reminder to me that the best is yet to come. John Wesley used to say that. The best is yet to come. And the new moderator-elect likes to finish his mail, his emails and other things, with that quote. The best is yet to come. Advent is not intended to be a season in which we nostalgically look back. It's an invitation to look to the future with a sense of hope. I like the old Peanuts cartoon, one with Charlie Brown, and it poses a question about peaks and valleys. In one, Charlie Brown's little sister, whose name was Sally, said, "Life is full of ups and downs. But what if I've already reached the highest point in my life?" According to Isaiah, the answer is simple. You're asking the wrong question. The highest point in your life, the highest point in any life, is in the future, not in the past. And that, my friends, is the essence of hope. It's the firm assurance that God is in charge of the future. An assurance based on our belief that God has been with us and journeying with us in the past, and the future that God has in store for us is filled with good things. I did some more research and found out a story about a guy called Phillips Brooks. Anybody recognise that name? Thank you, Mary. You're on the ball today. Phillips Brooks. Let me tell the story though. You just sit quietly now and I'll give you the rest, okay? Phillips Brooks was a great 19th century preacher. As the quote goes, he was great in oratory, great in the esteem of the people, and great in size, standing 6 feet 6 inches tall. In 1865, Brooks journeyed to the Holy Land where he rode a horse from Jerusalem to Bethlehem on Christmas Eve. Now, just in case you haven't been there, it's actually not that far from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. You could kind of walk it if you needed to. Don't think, Darwin to Catherine or anything like that. They're pretty close together. But he rode a horse down there, and he visited the field where it said the shepherds saw the angel. Even to this day, that field is called Shepherd's Field. It's not hard, people. Come on, get with the program. The field where the shepherds saw the angels is called Shepherd's Field. That's good. And he remained there, down there, and he went to midnight services at the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Bethlehem, right in the middle of Bethlehem, where the town square is called Manger Square. Good attempt though. The town square was positive. Manger Square. Anyway, Church of the Nativity, he's there. He found the whole experience very moving. This was shortly after the American Civil War. The chaos and din of war was behind him, and everything must have looked very peaceful. And he envisioned a peaceful night in history, not unlike the one that he was now experiencing, in which the Christ child was born. 3 years later, needing a Christmas carol for the Sunday school Christmas pageant, he decided to write one. Inspired by memories of Bethlehem, he wrote the words in one brief sitting. And then, a bit like today, he handed it to the organist and said, "You're on, mate." And the organist came up with a tune, on more or less on the spot or with very little notice, which went like something like this. Da, 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 da. But in England, and here we sing it to a different tune. But now you know where we're going with this. We'll sing that hymn, O Little Town of Bethlehem, more than once in the coming weeks. This hymn has significantly influenced our understanding of the Christmas story, but I'm not sure it's a really accurate portrayal of history. His vision of Bethlehem came from looking to the past, and it probably wasn't as idyllic as he thought. He forgot about the crowds in the city that night. There were so many people, in fact, that you couldn't get a room in the place. He forgot that those people had not gathered to celebrate the birth of a baby. They hadn't even come for a religious festival. They came and were probably commiserating with one another about the pain of taxation. I dare say that the first Christmas was anything but still. Quiet grumbling, perhaps, but not the pristine stillness that Phillips Brooks envisioned. What was certainly true, however, was that no one noticed the birth of a baby in a manger stall. The people were too busy with other activities and affairs. The crowds were too busy placing their hope in the future, in their anticipation of the fulfillment of Isaiah's promise, to notice how God was working in the present and to answer all their hopes and fears. What was true then is true today. Whether we're talking about peace in some troubled part of the world, Armenia, Afghanistan, or somewhere else, or an answer to the plague of AIDS in our world. During the past week we had World AIDS Day. Or whether we're living in fear of COVID-19. It might get here. We keep letting you Victorians in. It might sneak up here. Or perhaps we live at home where there is a fear of abuse. Whether we're facing our own mortality or pondering the effects of pollution on our planet, our hope lies in the baby born in Bethlehem, who still comes to us today, where meek souls will receive him still. The dear Christ enters in. The hope that Isaiah proclaims to a people in bondage is a word that still brings comfort today. But the hope lies in the future, not in the past. So let's stop looking for a nostalgic Christmas celebration from the past and begin looking for signs that God is already at work in our midst, looking toward the day when the hopes and fears we all have may be met.